What I'm going to talk with you about today is a project that I've been working on for the past 3 years called Code for America. We are called a startup nonprofit. People have called us or we call ourselves a Peace Corps for geeks, a Teach for America for civic hackers. I'm really happy that I get to kind of tell you guys a bit more about what we're learning today, so I don't have to just talk in these like tiny little like buzzword acronyms and little pithy phrases. Hopefully I can show you some of the stories that we're seeing from our fellowship, which is our flagship program that basically recruits developers, designers, and data scientists to go work with government for a year. But before we start talking about government, I want to kind of characterize a little bit of the problem that we see. And so in order to do that, I want to use an analogy, which is the banking sector. So you guys should all, after you're done with this, when you call your parents, because I'm sure you guys are all calling your parents every night because you're good people and they sent you to Stanford, so you have a lot to be thankful for. But they can probably remember a time when they had to go into the bank to get their money out. There were no ATMs. There was no Square. There was no mobile payments. And now there is. And there's an explosion of innovation around the way that we transact and the way we do commerce. And it has not only made the simple convenience of not having to go into the bank to get your money, or even more in a more crazy prospect, the fact that you had to go to a bank on a Friday to get all your money out for the weekend. The idea that you even know how much money you're going to spend on the weekend, that kind of boggles my mind. But again, it's lowered the entry barriers for people to do business. It's lowered the entry barriers for the kind of businesses that are created. I don't need to expound on the qualities of what Square, PayPal, and all this mobile banking stuff have done. But frankly, when it comes to government, it is mostly still the line thing. We just do the line thing a lot more in government. And while this is an inconvenience, it also extends to the systems that are being used in government. Oh, I have a clicker here. This is awesome. All right. It also extends to the systems being used in government. This is the green screen computer that our fellows in New Orleans last year used to get the property data out of the assessor's office.
That thing is probably, what, 25 years old?
At least 25 years old. Like, this is crazy. This isn't even connected to the internet. All right? And this is not the status quo. It's not this bad everywhere. And it's really not the CIO's fault. It's not the Chief Information Officer's fault. It's not the Chief Technology Officer at that city's fault. To know just how broad the problem is, you can look at the fact that a president's signature initiative is suffering from technical difficulties, right? We don't really need to go into that, but it's really embarrassing. And it says something that it is indicative of the whole broader system of the way that government uses technology. And what we see here is hold on, I swear to God, this is gonna be good. And also what's going to happen as government continues to not have the technology to do its job effectively. What are we going to have? More and more empty meeting rooms. People are going to lose the enthusiasm of communities to even give a shit about what government is doing. It becomes more and more a thorn in our side rather than the vehicle that we use to get what we need. And so that's what the mission of Code for America is. It's to get government back on this curve. And so when we think about the problem both of the lines, of the inferior systems, really what we need to address here is the fact that society has attached itself to a curve of innovation that is exponentially outpacing that of government. And so what happens when a society does it? What happens when a society prescribes itself to a curve of innovation that its government does not? How long is that sustainable for a democracy? And so we have a few different ways and levers that we are trying to get government back on the curve. And the most fundamental way is with our fellowship. This is admittedly kind of some of the younger crop. And this is at our open house. maybe 2.5 hours into our open house. And what we did was, as I mentioned, we started a fellowship program that basically is working on a service model where we recruit developers, designers, and data scientists from the tech industry to go work in city government for a year, city and county government for a year. Over that year, they identify a core problem with local governance, and they support a government partner to create a piece of technology that tries to improve it. And so I'm going to tell you a few stories about what that looks like, and also a few of our other programs. So that's the service model. The second one is something that I worked to start last year with a great guy named Kevin Curry. Is essentially, we had such a huge outpouring of enthusiasm for this fellowship program. We've had 500 people apply for 20 spots, and then 1,000 people apply for 26 spots, which means that our acceptance rate is actually even lower than Stanford's. And that's not really, we're not trying to create a narrative of exclusivity. What we're trying to create is a platform for participation in these problems. Our mission statement is using the people and power of the web to create a government that works, that is for the people, by the people, for the 21st century. And this is essentially the platform we're creating. Is one around this fellowship model, this service. This is also a volunteer service model. This is a grassroots side of Code for America, where we have 40 different, believe it or not, 40 different groups around the country that are working with their local government to help them make better decisions around technology, to help redeploy pieces of open source software that can help them better engage with their citizens, help work and analyze the data that they're creating within local government. In my city of Oakland, every week you have about 20 to 30 people meeting having a meeting in City Hall about this stuff. So the key here to think about is that people do want to work on this stuff. And I think that what we see from the fellowship and from the brigade is the fact that Jeff Hammerbacher has this great quote. He says, the best minds of our generation are trying to get people to click on ad space. And just consider that. That is the incentive of the market. And so there's obviously going to be a huge outpouring of enthusiasm when you actually create avenues for people in the tech industry to work on things that matter just a little bit more than getting people to click on ad space. And frankly, one of the really cool things we see is that the geeks in tech are not so different from the geeks in government. And once we start creating forums for them to connect, we've seen some really great instances of where that can be powerful. So this is just a picture of one of the number of hackathons that we run around the country. The next is our accelerator. And so again, the first one was a service-oriented model. The second is a grassroots volunteer model. The third is our accelerator, which just happens to be run by Dharmishta, who's sitting right here. And basically the idea here is very simple, is that one of the biggest problems, and I'm sure if you follow the healthcare.gov debacle, you'll notice that people aren't just saying that we didn't have the right people building the site. It was that the very basic way that government procures services is broken. Is that they couldn't have gotten the right contractor to build the thing if even that contractor was raising its hand and saying, we have the best technology to do this, and we'll do it for a really great price. And this is very, very much what happens both at the federal level, but also at the local level, is that you have companies, and I won't name them, oftentimes, they're Oracle, I could go off on this a lot, but basically you have companies that they are not experts in building great software for government, they are experts in contracting with government. And that means that they are the ones that have mastered how to get over the various barriers you have in procurement, that know how to sell to government. And the result is nothing less than these companies who are bloodletting both the federal government and state governments, but also bloodletting the technology budgets of American cities. And so this is why with the Accelerator, what we're trying to do is tap into the market. And so I'm trying to understand what are the rigidities that have been created both by procurement, but also, just the simple nature of looking at government as a customer. And so here's a slide that I really like, which is you look at the iOS app market, it's $2 billion. And look at all of the innovation, all the effort that's being done to try and capture that $2 billion. Then you look at the video game market, $10 billion. The combined government IT spend is $140 billion. And so what we try and do this program, we have companies apply who have technology that could be used for government, and we try and help navigate some of those rigidities. Finally, there's a peer network, and this is what I spend as the government partnerships manager. This is what I spend the bulk of my time running. And basically, our goal here is that what you find is that local government is full of individuals that have a vision of government working differently. They're passionate about their cities and counties. But the thing is they don't have the capacity or resources to realize that vision of government working differently. And what I've seen is that someone who has a vision of government working differently 20 years later really just ends up looking like your average bureaucrat. And really, it's been these guys that have make the fellowship possible. It's because our fellows go in and all of a sudden they are that capacity. All of a sudden they are that extra hand and technological expertise that can make their vision of government a reality. And then these people know where all the bodies are buried, they know where all the landmines are, and they can help navigate that process. And they're also the people that help sustain the impact of the technology that we're building. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there, because some of these might appeal to you guys more or less, and we have very different outcomes from each of these. But again, service model, grassroots model, market model, and this is more of like our kind of think tank and network model. So let's actually talk about some of the tech we're doing at Scene. And one of the first app that that really we got notoriety for was a little app called Adopt a Hydrant. And so when the fellows got to Boston in their first year, they actually arrived in a snowstorm and in a blizzard. They couldn't really get to work at all because no one was really coming to the office. So instead, they actually manned the phone lines of the 311 call center, and they started taking all of these requests. And they noticed that one really big problem was that in a snowstorm, the hydrants actually get snowed over. And so that means that, especially when you're talking about structure fires, the difference between the minutes that a firefighter has to dig out a hydrant is huge. It's the difference between house or no house. So basically, this was a very simple dots on a map app that allows people to adopt the hydrant in front of their home or business. And so I will be the first to say, no one has adopted any of these hydrants in Boston still. Maybe they did at first, but they didn't. And so, but they're not now. We have seen successful redeployments of this application in Honolulu, where they don't have snowstorms, but they are really afraid of tsunamis. And they've been able to use this effectively to make sure that people, whenever they test the sirens once a month, that they actually send an email to people's inbox and say, did you hear it? And if you didn't, can you go check the batteries in that siren? But what I want to use this app for, and it's something that we kind of were able to characterize a model of how do you use the community as a capacity for governance. That kind of has been our driving motivation for the past 3 years. But this is a very, very, very superficial form of engagement. And so the next few stories I want to tell you will show about how we are deepening that engagement, getting further down into what we would call the civic stack, the technologies that government uses for core governance needs. This is a really cool one. This is called Textizen. This is one of our currently in our incubator companies. They've taken this and they made a whole company out of it, where they were in Philadelphia, and they found at the same time that they were there, they're trying to get feedback on Philadelphia's master plan for the next 25 years. And how many of you guys have been to a public meeting? Don't lie. Okay, great. I see maybe an eighth of the incredibly engaged, intelligent students of Stanford go to public meetings. And there's a reason for that. It's because we don't see it as worth our time. We don't see it as a really great way to change the process. we go and we get shouted down by all those people who go to every public meeting and are the same constant voices that are there all the time. So how do we start to solve that feedback process? Well, one really good way to do it is with a very, very simple text message app. And so what we did was basically posters plus SMS app equals better engagement overall. And what we did was we put, would you use a rail line along the boulevard to get to Center City? So that means that it's in the bus shelter, so it's kind of obscured if you're not in the bus shelter. If you're standing there, you're waiting for the bus, this is your opportunity to give feedback. If you don't have the time to go to a public meeting, this is a great opportunity to do that. You also have that feedback located by the place that it's given it, right? So it's really, really helpful. And as I said, so here's an example. Both here's the question, and then what is your zip code? And then that is authentic engagement with the community around their needs. The second one that I'll tell you about is when we went to Honolulu, they asked us, they were like, hey, can you just like basically remake our website? And we were like, oh, sure, maybe. Like the...
Find a fellow who was willing to go to Honolulu?
Yes. Yeah, shocking, right? Shocking. So we went down there, and their website is like thousands of pages at this point. There's no way that our 3 fellows could remake the entire website. But what we could do was we could show them a little about what was possible with a new design. And so this is much like every government website, is that you have like 6 tabs across the top. And then you can't even see all of them. You basically just go, you can scroll like down for days and just see the fiefdoms of what this website is for each department. And the reason why it is this way is actually part of a bigger problem, which is that one IT department has to manage all the changes on the website. I'm sure all of you guys have used like WordPress by now and know that you can access a simple CMS, go back and make your changes. That's not so with this. You have the reason why every government website looks the same is it's because the same people are making them. Shocking. Yeah.
What tool stack is this on? What JavaScript?
I have no clue what it was built off of, but what I can tell you is then what we decided to do. And that is something that's like, radical. You usually come to a government website with one question or just want to know one process. You don't care about what department that question relates to. You probably don't even know what department it relates to. And so we built a really simple interface that just said, what's your question? But the real innovation of this tool, and so here you go, shocker. You have one question and you come back with simple, easy to read steps. You don't have you don't have a whole 10-page PDF of every exception that could happen. You design for what 90% of people need, and you give it to them. Now, this is one that they did on their own, but there's no way that our 3 fellows could write every question that Honolulu would need. And we actually did they had good data on what are the questions that get called in and asked most frequently. What are the queries that come to our website? And so what they did was they held, I'm sure, how many guys have heard of a hackathon? Heard of a hackathon? Been to a hackathon? Awesome, I had you pegged already. And so what they did, instead of a hackathon, they had a write-a-thon, where on a weekend, they got city employees and community members to answer and create these templates for the most asked questions of the city. What better way to make sure that you have a readable, understandable directive on a government website than to make sure that it is written by a citizen themselves? And so here they are, they're going at it. One of the most frequently asked questions was, what do I do about wild pigs being a nuisance? Which probably isn't relevant to Palo Alto. But again, this just gets at, what do people ask these different governments, right? And here you have, she helped co-write the answer to that. And the thing that I want to highlight here is that when I want you to think back to that curve, right? The gap between the technology being used in the private in society and the technology being used in government. There is no way that we are going to make that, or going to bring those two, bring that gap in line if we follow the same route that Google did, or that Square did, or that any of these large companies did that pioneered those paths. We'll never catch up. So what I want you to think about here is how this model of engagement was actually a unique way of us leveling the playing field. And that is by really crowdsourcing and using the community as a capacity to make the technology extensible and to make it work, right? And here's another crazy idea, is that cities create citizens. And what is citizenship all about other than ownership? It is about giving people a chance to express their ownership over a place or an idea. And that's exactly what, in a small way, granted, that this write-a-thon does, right? It has a way of changing the experience of the entire city. So, the other thing is that we also code in public. So Honolulu Answers, a few months ago, turned into Oakland Answers at a National Day of Civic Hacking event. They had prepped it, and they had stood up this Ruby on Rails application. And they spent the day, and they've had multiple events where they sourced the most frequently asked questions in Oakland. It has a lot more to do with firearms in Oakland than nuisance pigs, but it's just as scalable. And it shows that what you guys really need to take away from this is that cities and local governments bang their head up against the same problems every day, and 99% of them are pursuing technological solutions for those problems. They're trying to reinvent the wheel. So by practicing by coding in public and having open source tech, we actually make it really easy for these apps to be redeployed in new places. So the next story I'm going to tell is about San Mateo County this year. In order to kind of survive in San Mateo County, it costs about $87,000 for a family of three. If you're making $20 an hour, that's only $41,000, right? The eligibility for CalFresh, which is basically food stamps in California, only goes up to $25,000. So you have this like very real gap that the citizens of San Mateo County live in. And so how do people get in out of that gap? This is Jackie. This is a woman the fellows met while they were doing user research. So the way our fellowship works is that we bring the fellows to San Francisco for a month of training. So we basically take techies and try and teach them negotiations and change management, how to be community organizers, and how to effectively engage with all the stakeholders that they're going to need in order to make these projects successful. It's a grueling, grueling month. And then in February, they get embedded in their city, and they talk to just about everybody under the sun, trying to scope out and design the problem they're going to try and tackle. Then they come back and they cross-fertilize a lot of their findings with the rest of their cohort. And then from there, they scope out, they do design research, and they start prototyping. And they use lean and agile principles to make sure they're releasing early and often so they can get to a successful application by the end. In their February residency, they met this woman named Jackie. Jackie is living in the Gap. She's got 2 kids. She's trying to start her own business. And what's so great is that Jackie was actually able to get in touch with the Economical Hunger Fund, and they were able to get her a car, and they were able to help her start her business. They were able to give her a seed grant. Now, the thing is that unless Jackie had found out this word of mouth, if she didn't known about Economical Hunger Fund, it might as well not have existed. And there are over 600 programs in San Mateo County that are similar to this, that are providing service for citizens. And here it's important to remember that the social safety net is made with fabric from multiple sources. It's both government providing services, but it's also a community of nonprofits and social service organizations that are making that real. So one of the best ways that they thought to honor that was, and this is what they currently use to get the information out there, right? This is a community information handbook. This is the most popular handout at the county fair. But the problem with this book is that it is out of date the second it is published. Services change, open and closing times change, and all you have is this paper book that has very little information about the services that are available to them. So what the fellows did was another crazy idea, kind of somewhat similar to Honolulu Answers, was they created a thing called SMC Connect. SMC Connect is basically the up-to-date online version of that handbook. And now it's not just available in English and Spanish, but it's available in 46 different languages, which matches the growing diversity of the San Mateo County community. And as you can see, here we go, Arabic, and here are the listings, and it's also obviously mobile responsive, et cetera. But the really cool thing about, and this is really important, is that as they built out this search, basically this database search, they needed to make their search smart. And so that's where we are able to involve our government partners once again. The people working in the Human Services Agency in San Mateo were able to edit and make sure and increase the effectiveness of the search algorithm by tagging a lot of the different listings. And as a result, they tagged 700 entries over 2 events, which is really great. But really the cool thing that I want you guys to focus on here is what it's built on top of. And this addresses a basic problem. So they needed to aggregate data from government, nonprofits, and community. Typically, that's really hard to do. They came in, and whoever makes that handbook, the Peninsula Public Library who makes the handbook, is just trying to aggregate their data as one source. So they basically have 5 people trying to call all these social service organizations. There's no way they can keep track of everybody. And so what Ohana does, which is what SMC Connect is built off of, is basically a database. It's an API, which is an application programming interface. And basically, in order to understand what an API is, it's just basically an Excel spreadsheet that is machine readable that any developer can access at any time, right? This is an open API. And so they had this crazy idea that let's create an open API where people can store information about all their social service from all these multiple sources. And SMC Connect is just one thing that's built on top of that API. What's really cool is that about 2 weeks ago, a developer in DC basically issued a pull request on GitHub. This is where we do a lot of our coding. And he had made a SMS interface for the database. So that basically means that, yes, the fellows had slaved away on making the API, they'd slaved away on making SMC Connect in their very short year. But because the data was open, and because it was machine readable and accessed by any developer who wanted to build on top of it, now San Mateo County also has an SMS text app. That means that you don't need to be online, you don't need to have a smartphone, you don't need to connect to the web in order to get access to this database. So it shows that, again, how are we going to close the gap? We're going to close the gap by making this data open and making sure that we provide this platform participation where anyone can build on top of this data as they're interested in it. So these are 2 examples of deepening engagement. Remember that adopt app? It's basically just adopt your hydrant. We won't even follow up with you, but just adopt it and you'll feel good about it. Now we're deepening engagement in a way where not only are citizens providing the capacity to build more effective government websites, we're also creating platforms for a whole community of developers and designers to create the interfaces for government. So what I want to talk about also is the work that I'm doing with our peer network, which again is finding the forward-thinking innovators within city government and trying to network them and connect them with the best practices they're using to try and close that gap. And how many people here basically use public transit to get to school every day? I imagine a lot of you guys live close to campus, some of you don't. And transit, particularly. Google Transit, no one really knows this, is basically Google Transit exists because of open public data. It's a woman named Bibiana McHugh in Portland TriMet, again, one of these local government bureaucrats who just was basically, in the year 2002, was looking at her online schedule of transit departures and looking at her paper schedule of transit departures and be like, this is as the only tools that she had to tell the community when the bus and when the trains were leaving. Which kind of sucks, because who the hell is actually going to go to another government website before outside of the existing whatever map they're using? right? And so she had this really crazy idea, and she called Google, and she was like, hey, Google, like, it seems like you guys are trying to organize all the world's information. Would you guys want my transit times? And they were like, why didn't we think of that? That's a really good idea. And so what they created was the general transit feed specification. And that's a really long way to say they basically created a formatted Excel spreadsheet. And they said, give us your transit arrival and departure times in this standard, and we'll ingest it into Google Maps. There you have Google Transit. You have data that is in government that is incredibly important to people in their everyday life. And so just to underscore the value of this, who needs to be at work on time? I don't have to be at work on time. Most often it is low-income hourly workers who have to be at work on time. Most often it is low-income hourly workers who depend on public transit to get to work on time. And so what this does is it actually creates a certain level of reliability that never existed for public transit before. The secondly is that for me though, I am what every transit agency in America would call a choice rider. I can choose between driving my car, or I can choose to ride the bus or the train. And because I'm incredibly type A, the idea of waiting at a bus stop or a train station for an indeterminate amount of time is incredibly vexing. And maybe you guys can empathize with this. And so what this simple innovation does is it allows all those choice riders to actually plan their day according with some level of specificity. And basically, as transit agencies have adopted GTFS, they have seen ridership go up. So that's just one crazy idea. This idea of creating, not just acknowledging that there is data within government that could be valuable, but that when we publish it in standard formats, it can have a huge amount of impact. And two things that we've done this year. So again, one other phenomenon that our whole movement is based off of is getting, both with Ohana as well as with transit, getting the data out there, opening the data, because government has data sets, and especially cities have data sets that really show like what is the pulse of a city. And they can tell you everything about the way it's working. And this is data they've closed in. And over the last 5 years, we've seen an explosion of cities that are willing to open up their data for developers to use or citizens to use. Yeah?
Ohana's underlying database is what? Ohana's underlying database, is there a particular, how do you create it? Is it secret?
Yes. Yeah.
As far as the bus locations, the dynamic and sharing of that information so you can see your bus come on Google Maps, is that real-time data also?
So GTFS originally in 2002 was not real-time GTFS. This was actually just the schedule times. Now, what you've now seen is real-time GTFS, which is they said, hey, maybe there is something to this Google Transit thing. And so now they've invested the time in the cities that have GPS transponders on buses. They now collect that information. And then it actually just augments the regular GTFS by saying plus 2 minutes, minus 2 minutes, plus 1 minute, minus 1 minute. It's really kind of cool to see. Well, you could create it. You have the database, and you have the GTFS, and you have the real-time GTFS, so you could do it. So again, this is cities.data.gov, which was the federal government was like, oh, this is so cool. We really love seeing all these cities getting, trying to get technologically better, and let's aggregate all this data at once. And it's just a glut. It's a glut for me and you. It's a glut for any developer, right? And so what we've been trying to do is build off this GTFS model. And one thing we did this year was we released a standard format for the way that cities publish their restaurant inspections. So that means that now, for any restaurant that next time you guys go to San Francisco, I urge you, and you probably already do, look it up on Yelp. And now what you will see is that their health score. And there's another, not on this, and you can also see the total violation history of that restaurant. Crazy, right? And so in some ways, doesn't it almost make sense that this data has found its rightful place next to all the anecdotal evidence that we've crowdsourced on Yelp? Is that now you get to see the institution that you pay to keep the restaurants safe is now reporting their results. And so one of the kind of naughty areas here is that there are different health inspection regimes all around the country. These numbers change. But the point is that the data needs to be open and transparent, because oftentimes restaurant inspectors are just a thorn in a restaurant owner's side. Now that this is public, these numbers are actually crowdsourcing compliance to the health code, because it's no longer just a single relationship between government and restaurant. It is now a relationship between restaurant and all of us, right? And if you follow their health score, they're interested in making sure they're as compliant as possible, which means the health inspector is no longer a thorn in their side. This is a reason for them to re-engage in the democratic process of making sure all of the rules of the health code actually make people safer and make the food more safe. So this will save you from a bad plate of kung pao or something. But what I'm really interested in is something that is kind of come out in November, which is, again, a new twist on the way that really large companies can integrate public data with great outcomes. And that is cities, as you guys probably know, also inspect housing. They inspect all residences, which means that they basically have a full health and safety history of every apartment and house in their jurisdiction. Why? There are 30 million people in America who move house every year, and we're getting only increasingly more mobile as we go. Why is it that you just walk into an open house and that's it, and you say, okay, does the faucet work, etc.? There are a number of hidden hazards that are associated in these places, and I'm not just talking about the nuisances that are often reported in this data, like noisy neighbors, or don't you want to know if your landlord has evicted someone from his property in the past, 8 months, or they've done it 3 times? Again, these are just questions that can prompt, that you can use the data to prompt before you sign your lease. But there's also these hidden hazards. I was surprised to know that 2 in 5 asthma cases in the United States can be directly attributed to mold or poor ventilation in the home. This is data that the city has that you do not consider, when families do not consider in choosing their next home. Also, lead poisoning is a huge chronic problem for people of low income. Their kids get lead poisoning, and oftentimes these victims are children. So getting this data out there not only means that you can protect yourself, protect your families, predict what the experience of living in that place will be like, but again, the idea of crowdsourcing compliance to the building codes. It's giving government another tool to make sure that they don't have to send out an inspector every year. They don't have to. They can depend on the idea that we are crowdsourcing it by taking this data seriously. The other story I'll tell you is about the other trend we're seeing. This is I'm just telling cool stories, not what we're doing. This is one of my favorite guys. His name is Michael Flowers, and he is Mayor Bloomberg's analytics director. And there's 2 cool things about this. One is that what you see here as this moving visualization is the location of EMS calls for the week, right? And what they're able to do is, instead of having ambulance drivers park wherever they want to park, and oftentimes ambulance drivers are working all night, so that means they park next to the 24-hour coffee spot, and instead parking their ambulances close to where you have the highest per capita amount of EMS calls. And the other cool thing about this, and just as a hint to how you have to pay attention to the process, is they actually on the map they give the ambulance drivers, they actually say where all the other 24-hour coffee shops are they can go to. The other really cool story about this is using both breaking the silos within government, the way they use this data, and also using predictive analytics, is that they had a problem where the DWP was seeing a lot of clogged pipes. And so they're seeing a lot of clogged like grease pipes in New York City. And what they were able to do is they were able to not only take this data set and overlay it with restaurants so that then they could tell the health department which restaurants to go and inspect and raid. And what they would do is they'd find out, okay, well, we've mapped this grease clog to your restaurant, and lo and behold, you are not paying a grease hauler to haul your grease. We're going to give you a ticket. Instead, they said, all right, we can either give you a ticket or we can connect you with the local biodiesel community and you can sell your grease to them for a profit. So again, this is the whole idea of how do we make government work differently? How do we leverage data to make it work differently? And so that's it for me. I would love to talk with you guys. The last thing I will show you, and again, this is the idea of us deepening our sense of engagement, is in our first year. Hold on, let me see. What I need is, give me someone's address. Anybody? Anybody? Don't be scared. This isn't gonna be fun. This will be fine.
4431.
4431. You guys are gonna see where he lives. 4431.
Pacific Coast Highway.
Pacific Coast Highway.
Torrance, California.
Where?
Torrance.
Torrance.
It's a sufficiently safe distance from Stanford, so you won't be...
Does this look familiar? This looks familiar? So this is something that happened in 2012. This is called Blocky. And this is the idea that, again, as I was saying, what is citizenship all about? It's about ownership. So this basically created a way for people to change their landscapes. So I can show.
Code for America fellow...
You've been to this, yes. And you can like do that, and then wait. Do we maybe want to make sure there are... let's put some chairs out. Okay. All right. Excellent.
Looks better, Vivek.
And or like, it should really just have some free Wi-Fi on it. But see, the problem is, so this is basically like half a geodesic dome. That would be great there. So what this basically does is it engages people's creativity in the way they can change their communities, right? What is stopping a geodesic dome from being in that parking lot? Right? Well, probably a lot. Or even just a bench on the front, right? But the thing is that we were excited by this. This is one of the most viral things we've ever created at Code for America. But we didn't really push it because where's the friction with government, right? This is basically surfacing someone's very crazy, often crazy, idealized version of what their landscape would look like. And just to show you kind of where we're going with this, this is Street Mix. This was created this year by a few different fellows in their spare time, their 20% time that we allow for these projects. And now I want you to notice, and so this is pretty simple. I can move this around over here. I can widen the lane, right? I can add another street post. So similar to Blocky, right? But basically what I can do is I can recreate my street. And what I'm doing is I'm actually able to change it in the same graphical language that planners use. And so that means when you share this with an urban planner, they actually know what you're talking about. They can tell you exactly where it is not working to code. And we've actually already seen in community meetings about streetscape redesigns, they've asked citizens to bring a street mix image of what they want the street to look like. Put them all up at the beginning of the community meeting so that you don't have to spend 45 minutes of people trying to articulate what they want. They can just show what they want. And oftentimes in a lot of these places, there's a barrier of language. This language is universal. So again, it shows the deepening engagement we're seeing at Code for America. Thank you. Let's do some questions now.